My son and his wife lived in my house for 8 years. When the baby was born, I offered to help, but, to my surprise, my daughter-in-law pushed me hard and screamed at me, "Don't touch the baby, you're filthy." In that instant, my blood ran cold. I called my son, and the 3 words my husband said next left them completely stunned. But before I continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories reach. My name is Helen, and I'm 73 years old. Everything changed when our son, Evan, showed up at our door with his new wife, Chloe. They had recently married and were going through financial difficulties. My husband Arthur and I looked at each other that day without needing to exchange words. "Of course, you can stay with us. It's what families do. They support each other in tough times. It'll only be for a few months until we get back on our feet," Evan promised as they brought their bags inside. At first, everything seemed normal. I was happy to have the company, to have my son back home. Chloe seemed kind and helpful. She always offered to help in the kitchen, asked for my family recipes, and showed interest in how I maintained the house. I felt useful again, as if I were passing a legacy to the next generation. But what was supposed to be months turned into a year, then 2, and finally, we reached 8 long years. The dynamic of the house changed so gradually that I barely noticed what was happening. First, it was small suggestions about how to better organize the kitchen cabinets. Then, comments on how I should prepare certain dishes. Over time, the suggestions turned into criticisms, and the criticisms into disguised orders. "I think it's better if you don't touch that, Helen. Let me handle it." Or, "Helen, that's not the right way to do it. Do it properly." Little by little, I began to feel like a stranger in my own kitchen. I realized I avoided cooking when Chloe was around, waiting for her to leave to prepare something simple for Arthur and me. I started to move around the house carefully, trying to make as little noise as possible, as if I were invading a space that didn't belong to me. Arthur, of course, noticed the change in me. "What's wrong with you, Helen?" he would sometimes ask when we were alone in our room. "You seem like a shadow in your own house." I would just shrug, not wanting to create problems. "I'm just adapting. Chloe has her ways, and she's only trying to help." And then, after months, Chloe had a baby. A beautiful, perfect little boy. My first grandson. My heart overflowed with love when I saw him for the first time at the hospital. When they brought the baby home, I prepared everything to welcome them. Fresh flowers in the living room, the house impeccably clean, a small gift for the newborn. 3 days after the baby's arrival, I was in the kitchen, preparing a small flower arrangement to brighten the living room where Chloe spent most of her time with the newborn. I hummed quietly, happy to have a purpose, to be able to contribute in some way. I heard the baby crying from the living room and decided to see if I could help. I walked silently towards the living room, carrying the flowers. Chloe was sitting on the sofa, looking tired, with the baby in her arms. She saw me and her face immediately transformed. "What are you doing? Why are you making so much noise? The baby needs to rest." "I'm sorry," I whispered, taking a step back. "I just wanted to bring some flowers to brighten the room." She stood up, holding the baby protectively. I took a step forward, just wanting to get a better look at my grandson. That's when it happened. I felt her arm push me back with force, making me lose my balance. I fell, the flowers scattering across the floor. The water from the vase formed a dark puddle around me. "Don't you dare touch him," she screamed, her face twisted in disgust. "You're filthy." Then she added, "Look at the mess you made." Time seemed to freeze in that moment. Me, sitting on the floor of my own living room, surrounded by scattered flowers and water. My body ached from the impact, but the physical pain was insignificant compared to the humiliation and shock I felt. I looked at my hands, the same hands that had cared for my son his entire life, the hands that had prepared thousands of meals for my family, that had planted flowers in our garden, that had held Evan when he was just a baby. "Filthy," she had said. I was filthy. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the baby had stopped crying, as if he too were shocked by what had just happened. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, not from the pain of the fall, but from the cruelty of those words. In my entire life, No one had ever treated me with such contempt. I tried to pull myself together. My hands were trembling as I tried to pick up the scattered flowers. I couldn't look up. I didn't want to see Chloe's expression, the disdain in her eyes. I felt Arthur's presence even before I saw him. He had come into the room, drawn by the noise. Helen. His voice was soft but firm. He knelt to help me up, his hands gentle on my arms. "Let me help you." It was only when I looked into his eyes that I realized something had changed. There was an anger there, contained but unmistakable. It wasn't an anger directed at me, but something deeper, more resolute. Arthur looked at Chloe, who remained standing, our grandson in her arms, an expression of poorly disguised satisfaction on her face. "Evan," Arthur called out, his voice cutting through the silence. Our son appeared in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. "Dad," he began, his voice weak. "Chloe is just being protective of the baby. New mothers can be like that." "Evan," Arthur interrupted, his eyes never leaving Chloe's face. "I need to talk to you now." Chloe shifted the baby to her other arm, her chin held high in defiance. "Actually, Arthur, Evan and I were just discussing that we think it would be best if Helen stayed in her room when the baby is in the main areas of the house, for hygiene reasons, you understand?" My heart shattered in that moment. To be banished from the common areas of my own home? To be treated like a danger to my own grandson? I looked at Evan, hoping he would say something, anything, to defend me. But he just avoided my eyes, muttering something about doing what's best for the baby. Arthur helped me up the stairs to our room. My clothes were wet from the vase water. My knees ached from the fall. But the physical pain was secondary to the feeling of betrayal I felt. "Are you hurt?" Arthur asked as he helped me change my clothes. I shook my head no. How could I explain that the wound wasn't physical? How could I describe what it means to be pushed out of your own home piece by piece, day by day, year after year, until you become a stranger within your own walls? That night, lying in bed next to Arthur, I sensed his restlessness. He wasn't sleeping. His breathing didn't have the familiar rhythm of sleep. His mind was working, processing, deciding. The next morning, I moved silently around our room, a habit I had developed over the years to avoid disturbing anyone. Arthur watched my careful movements with a thoughtful expression. "Helen," he finally said, "when was the last time you felt comfortable in our house?" The question took me by surprise. When, indeed. I tried to remember the last time I had come downstairs without fear of doing something wrong, the last time I had cooked without being criticized, the last time I had spoken freely without being interrupted or corrected. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Maybe before they moved in?" "That's going to change," he said simply. In the hours that followed, I heard Arthur confronting Evan in his old study, now converted into the baby's area. The voices were low, but intense. I couldn't make out the exact words, but the tone was unmistakable. Arthur was finally questioning the arrangement he had allowed for so long. Later that day, I was organizing papers in our room, trying to keep busy, when I found something strange. Utility bills I didn't recognize, all in the name of Chloe Montero, but with our address. Confused, I kept looking and found more documents. Transfers of all our basic services, electricity, water, gas, internet, all in her name. My heart started beating faster. Something was very wrong. I kept searching, now with a purpose, and found an official form from the Postal Service, a mail forwarding request, dated 6 months ago. All mail from our address was being rerouted to first arrive in Chloe's name. When Arthur came back to the room, I showed him what I had found. His face turned pale as he examined the documents. "Helen, when was the last time you saw our utility bills?" I thought for a moment. "I don't know. You usually handle that, Arthur. But now that you mention it, I haven't seen a single bill in months." "Neither have I," he said gravely. We looked at each other. The realization of what was happening was slowly dawning on us. Chloe wasn't just taking over our house day to day. She was systematically establishing a legal claim to our property. "Arthur," I whispered, my voice trembling. "She's trying to take our house." Before he could answer, we heard footsteps in the hall. Chloe appeared in the doorway, the baby in her arms, a sweet smile on her face that didn't reach her eyes. "Is everything all right? You two look upset." Arthur held up the documents. "Chloe, why are our utility bills in your name?" For a fraction of a second, I saw something in her eyes. Calculation. A quick assessment of the situation. Then the smile returned, wider. "Oh, those," she said with a light laugh. "There was a mix-up with the billing company a few months ago. They kept sending the bills to the wrong address, so I just transferred them to my name temporarily to make sure they got paid on time. I meant to mention it to you." "For 6 months?" Arthur asked. "Has it been that long?" "Time flies with the baby and all. I'll call tomorrow and transfer them back if you want." The explanation was plausible, but something in her delivery was false. Calculated. Arthur continued. "And what about the mail forwarding? The Postal Service has a forwarding request sending all mail from this address to you first." This time, the pause was longer. "Mail forwarding? I honestly don't know what you're talking about, Arthur. Maybe there was a mistake when I updated my address after we moved in." 8 years ago? Arthur shot back. Chloe's mask of sweetness began to crack. "I said I would look into it, didn't I? I don't understand why you're making such a big deal out of this. We're family. We all live here together. It's our house, Chloe." Arthur's voice was firm. She looked at him with what I can only describe as pity. "Of course it is. I never said it wasn't. But we live here too, Arthur. We contribute to the household. It makes sense for the bills to be organized efficiently." It was then that I found my voice, small but determined. "How do you contribute to the household, Chloe?" Chloe's eyes narrowed slightly as she turned to me. It was the first time in years I had challenged her directly, and I could see the momentary shock on her face before she regained control. "I take care of the baby. I manage the household schedules. I make sure everything runs smoothly," she replied, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "By putting the bills in my name without telling you. Taking care of practical matters that you and Arthur obviously don't have time for anymore." The condescension in her voice was unmistakable. She was no longer trying to hide her true thoughts about us. "We are not senile, Chloe," Arthur said. "We've managed our own home and finances for over 40 years. "Of course you have," she said, but her tone suggested the exact opposite. "I'm just trying to help." She then added, "But if you'd rather handle everything on your own, that's fine. Evan and I can find another place to live." There was something calculated in her threat, as if she knew exactly which buttons to push. She was betting that the fear of losing access to our grandson would make us back down, would make us accept any behavior from her to keep the peace. To my surprise, Arthur didn't hesitate. "Actually, I think that might be for the best." Chloe's face went pale. "Excuse me? I think it's time for you and Evan to find a place of your own. You've been here for 8 years. That's long enough. You can't be serious." Her voice went up an octave. Evan, get in here." Our son appeared in seconds, looking alarmed. "What's wrong?" "Your father is trying to kick us out," Chloe said, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "He's upset about some silly paperwork, and now he wants to throw us out on the street with a newborn baby." Arthur handed the documents to Evan. "Your wife has been putting our home's utility bills in her name without our knowledge or permission. She has also had our mail forwarded through the Postal Service." Evan frowned as he looked over the papers. "Chloe, what is this?" "It's nothing," she said quickly. "Just some administrative convenience to ensure the bills got paid on time. Your father is making it sound much more sinister than it is." "For 6 months?" Evan asked. "I told you, I meant to mention it. With the pregnancy and everything, it just slipped my mind." Evan looked at the papers more carefully. "This makes it look like you're the primary resident here." "That's ridiculous," Chloe snapped. "It's just paperwork. Your parents are being paranoid." But Evan was no longer looking at his wife. He was looking at Arthur, and I could see the exact moment the pieces began to click into place in his mind. All the small changes over the years, all the ways Chloe had gradually taken more control over the house, all the times she made decisions without consulting us. "Chloe," Evan said slowly, "why would you put the utilities in your name without asking?" "I already explained." "No," he interrupted, his voice growing stronger. "Why would you really do it?" For the first time since I'd known her, Chloe looked genuinely flustered. The baby began to cry in her arms, sensing the tension in the room. "I was trying to help," she said, but her voice no longer held conviction. "Taking care of your parents' house. It's not taking care. It's organizing." Someone needed to get these things in order properly. Properly? I found the strength to speak again, my voice firmer this time. We have taken care of our affairs properly since before you were born. Chloe's mask finally fell completely. Her careful composure shattered, and for the first time, I saw the true rage underneath. Yes, in order, she shot back. Someone needed to be in control here because nothing was getting done right. Do you know how frustrating it is to watch things being handled inefficiently when you know you could do it better? So, you decided to take control, I said. I decided to step up and handle the things that needed to be taken care of without asking for permission. Chloe's voice was filled with a contained fury. I live here. I contribute to this household. I shouldn't need permission to organize our home efficiently. It is not your home, Arthur said firmly. It has been my home for 8 years, she nearly shouted. I've cleaned every room, organized every closet, managed every system. I know this place better than either of you at this point. The arrogance in her voice was breathtaking. She genuinely believed that living in our house for 8 years gave her more right to it than our 40 years of ownership. Chloe? Evan said, his voice quiet but intense. What exactly were you planning to do with all these bills in your name? She looked at him as if he'd asked a stupid question. I was planning on keeping the house running smoothly. Someone has to be responsible for these things. But why did it have to be you? Because I'm the one who's here all day. I'm the one who notices when things need attention. I'm the one who has the time to handle the administrative details. You could have asked us to handle our own bills, I pointed out. I could have. But why would I if I was already taking care of them? Because it's our house, Arthur repeated. Chloe's patience finally ran out completely. Your house that you can't afford to maintain without our help. Your house that was falling apart before I started organizing it. Your house that Evan and I have subsidized with our presence and our labor for 8 years. Subsidized? Evan's voice was incredulous. Yes, subsidized. Do you think we were just living here for free? Do you think I wasn't contributing? I've been managing this house, maintaining these systems, improving this property. That has value, Evan. That's worth something. Not ownership, I said firmly. Isn't it? At what point does sweat equity become actual equity? At what point does the person actually running the household get a say in how it's run? A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just about bills and mail forwarding. This was about a fundamental belief that her 8 years of living in our house gave her ownership rights. Chloe, Arthur said carefully. Do you believe you own this house? She looked at him as if he were being deliberately obtuse. I believe I've earned a stake in this house, yes. You've earned a stake in our house? The disbelief in Arthur's voice was palpable. I've earned a stake in the house where I've lived for 8 years, where I've raised my family, where I have contributed my time, my energy, and my effort to make it a better place. Evan looked at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. Chloe, this is insane. You can't just claim ownership of someone else's property because you lived there, can't I? What about common law marriage rights? What about tenants' rights? What about the fact that I have been the primary person managing this property for years? You're not married to the house, I said, but my voice was trembling now. And you're not a tenant. You're a guest who overstayed her welcome. I am a family member who has been contributing to this household while you two have been coasting on property rights you established decades ago. The arrogance of her statement left us all momentarily speechless. Chloe seemed to take our silence as agreement. Look, she said, her voice becoming reasonable again. I'm not trying to take anything away from anyone. I just think we need to acknowledge the reality of the situation. This house runs because I make it run. These systems work because I maintain them. This family runs smoothly because I organize it. This family, Evan said slowly. Or your family? Our family, all of us, including you and your parents. Chloe glanced at me and Arthur, and I saw something cold flash in her eyes. Sure, including Arthur and Helen. They're an important part of this house. An important part? Arthur repeated. In our own house? In our family home, yes. It's not a family home, Evan said, his voice rising. It's Mom and Dad's home that they've been generous enough to let us live in. For 8 years, Evan. At some point, generosity becomes partnership. Not without discussion, Not without agreement, not without consent. Chloe's face was flushed now, her control completely gone. Consent? I've been getting consent for 8 years in the form of you all allowing me to handle these responsibilities. You've been perfectly happy to let me run everything, as long as you didn't have to think about it. She turned to look at Arthur and me directly. And you two have been perfectly happy to let me handle all the hard parts of maintaining this house while you play at being generous grandparents. We took care of our own house, I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the trembling I felt inside. Really? When was the last time you balanced a checkbook? When was the last time you called a utility company? When was the last time you researched the best internet plan or negotiated a better rate for something? Her words hit me like little arrows, because there was truth in them. In recent years, Chloe had gradually taken over many of those tasks, always framing them as helpful efficiency rather than a takeover. And we, in our complacency, had allowed it. That doesn't give you ownership rights, Arthur said. It gives me a voice in the decisions that affect my family's living situation. Your family can have its own living situation, Evan said quietly. Chloe whirled to face him, her eyes blazing. On what money? On your non-existent job? On my non-existent career because I've been busy managing this house for 8 years? That was your choice. That was our agreement. You said we would stay here temporarily while we got back on our feet. You said your parents wanted to help. You said this was best for our family. I said we would stay temporarily, not permanently. And I never said you should take over their house. I didn't take over anything. I stepped up where it was needed. The baby was wailing louder now, disturbed by the shouting. Chloe tried to soothe him while continuing to argue, but her multitasking was falling apart under the stress. Maybe, I said quietly, finding a courage I didn't know I had, the baby should be somewhere quieter. Chloe clutched our grandson tighter. He's fine where he is. He's upset because we're all yelling. He's upset because his family is being torn apart by selfish people who can't appreciate what they have. The insult was so casual, so direct, it took a moment to register. I felt my face drain of color. Selfish people? Arthur repeated. Yes, selfish. You have more space than you need, more resources than you use, and a family who has been helping you maintain it all. And the second someone asks for basic consideration, you want to throw us out. In that moment, I could see clearly that there was no reasoning with her. In her twisted mind, we were the villains for wanting control of our own home. She genuinely believed she was the victim in a situation where she had been systematically taking over our lives. The next few days were tense. Chloe retreated to the main bedroom with the baby, rarely coming out except to make meals for herself and the baby. Evan seemed lost, torn between his loyalty to his wife and the dawning realization of what she had done to his parents. Arthur was quiet but determined, spending hours on the phone and going out to meetings he didn't explain. One afternoon, while tidying our room, I found Arthur rummaging through papers in our personal file cabinet. "What are you looking for?" I asked. "Our insurance policies?" he replied. "I want to make sure everything is still in our names." I started to help him look, and that's when we found something that made my blood run cold. Mixed in with our personal documents was a deed transfer form, blank, but with our property description already filled in. At the bottom, in handwriting I recognized as Chloe's, were notes on property values and tax assessments. "Arthur," I whispered, my hands shaking. "She's researching how to transfer the ownership of our house." Arthur examined the document carefully. "Where did you find this?" "In our file cabinet." She must have put it there when she was going through our papers to get information for the utility transfers. Arthur studied the form more closely. "Helen, do you remember anyone being at our house recently? Any strangers Chloe might have let in?" I thought for a moment. "There was someone here last week, while you were at your doctor's appointment. Chloe said it was someone from the municipal assessor's office, verifying property values for tax purposes. I thought it was routine. Did you see his credentials?" "No." Chloe handled it. "She said she didn't want to bother me with official business." Arthur picked up the phone. And after a few calls, we discovered that the municipal assessor's office had not sent anyone to our house. Chloe had let a stranger into our home under false pretenses, and now we had property transfer forms in our file cabinet. "What is she planning?" Arthur whispered. Before I could answer, we heard the front door open and Evan's voice calling for us. We went downstairs to find him in the living room holding his son, a serious look on his face. Arthur showed him the deed transfer form. Evan examined the document, his expression growing more and more concerned. "Last week," he said slowly, "Chloe was asking me questions about inheritance laws. She said she was just curious about how property transfers work when parents get older." "What kind of questions?" Arthur asked. "Things like, if someone lives in a house long enough, can they claim ownership? If someone significantly improves a property, do they gain rights to it? If elderly people can no longer manage their affairs, can family members legally take over?" A chill ran down my spine. Every question seemed calculated, part of a larger plan. "And what did you tell her?" I asked. "I told her I didn't know much about it, but that it sounded like she was overthinking things." Evan looked at Arthur with worried eyes. "Dad, she's not really trying to take your house, is she?" Arthur handed him a folder I didn't recognize. "Evan, your wife has spent months transferring our utilities into her name, forwarding our mail, and now researching property transfers. Someone posing as a municipal official was in our house last week gathering information. What do you think she's trying to do?" Evan read through the documents, his face growing paler with each page. "My God," he whispered finally, "she really is trying to take your house." "It would seem so. But that's insane. That's theft. That's fraud. That's what happens when someone feels entitled to something that doesn't belong to them." Arthur looked directly at our son. "Evan, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Are you a part of this? Did you know what she was planning?" The pain on Evan's face was evident. No, I had no idea. "And I'm horrified you even have to ask." "I had to ask. I understand why. But Dad, I would never do anything to hurt you and Mom. Never." That night, I heard Evan confront Chloe through the walls. Their voices rose and fell, with periods of shouting, followed by intense, whispered conversations. Sitting on our bed, my hands trembled as I tried to knit, an activity that used to calm me, but now did little to soothe my anxiety. Arthur came into the room after a while, his face grim. "I was with a lawyer today," he said. "Robert. He's going to help us sort this out." "What did he say?" I asked, setting my knitting aside. "He said what Chloe is doing looks like an attempt to establish adverse possession, or at the very least, tenants' rights. The utility transfers, the mail forwarding those, are classic steps someone might take to establish legal residency. Can she do that? Can she claim our house?" Robert said it's unlikely she could succeed with a full adverse possession claim because she moved in with our permission. But she could potentially claim tenants' rights, which would make removing her much more complicated. A knot formed in my stomach. What does that mean? It means if she's established herself as a tenant, even without a formal lease, we might have to go through formal eviction proceedings to remove her. But it's our house, Arthur. We let them live here for free for 8 years because Evan is our son. "I know, Helen. But the law doesn't always distinguish between generosity and formal leasing agreements. If someone has lived in a place long-term and has taken on household responsibilities, sometimes they can claim tenants' rights." I felt dizzy. "So we're stuck?" "Not necessarily. Robert is going to help us. He's preparing formal legal notices demanding that Chloe transfer all utilities and mail back to our names. And if she refuses, then we'll proceed with formal eviction proceedings." The words eviction proceedings sounded foreign in my ears. I never imagined we would one day be considering evicting our own son and daughter-in-law from our home. But as Arthur had pointed out, this wasn't just about them living with us. It was about Chloe systematically trying to take legal control of our property. Evan knocked on our door a few minutes later. His face was tired, but resolute. "She admitted it," he said without preamble. "Everything. The utilities, the mail, the property research. She's been planning this for over a year." "What did she say when you confronted her?" Arthur asked. "She said she was protecting our family's future. She said you're getting older and someone needed to make sure the house stayed in the family when you're gone." "Protecting the family by stealing from us," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "She said she was making sure the house would go to people who actually care for it, instead of being sold off to strangers." The twisted logic left me speechless. How could she justify theft as an act of family protection? And what did you tell her? Arthur asked. I told her what she was doing was theft and fraud. I told her if she didn't fix everything immediately, I would support you in having her arrested. How did she react to that? Evan's face hardened. She told me if I sided with you against her, she would make sure I never saw my son again. That threat changed everything. This was no longer just about property fraud. This was about a woman who was willing to use her own child as a weapon to get what she wanted. Evan, I said softly, placing my hand on his, what do you want to do? He looked at me with eyes that reminded me of the little boy I had raised, the one who always tried to do the right thing, even when it was hard. I want to do whatever it takes to stop her, he said. Even if it means losing my marriage, I am not going to let her steal from you, and I am not going to let her use my son as blackmail. The next morning, Arthur called Robert and told him we were ready to proceed with formal legal action. The time for family discussions and attempts at compromise was over. Chloe had made her choice. The formal legal notice was served to Chloe on a Tuesday morning. Arthur and I watched through our living room windows. A sheriff's deputy walked up to our front door, official documents in hand. I held Arthur's hand, both of us knowing this moment would change everything. Chloe opened the door with the baby in her arms. When she realized what was happening, her face went through a series of emotions I will never forget. Confusion, then recognition, then pure rage. She slammed the door so hard the baby started to cry. The legal notice demanded that Chloe transfer all utilities back to our names within 7 days, cancel the mail forwarding immediately, and cease any and all activities related to establishing residency or property claims on our property. It also informed her that she had 30 days to vacate the premises voluntarily or formal eviction proceedings would be initiated. More importantly, a formal complaint was being filed with the district attorney's office for identity theft, mail fraud, and attempted property fraud. Within an hour of being served, Chloe stormed into our living room, her face red with fury. I had wisely decided to visit my sister that day, not wanting to be present for what would undoubtedly be an ugly confrontation. But Arthur told me everything when I returned. You can't do this to me, she had screamed, waving the legal papers in the air. I have rights. I've lived here for 8 years. You have the right to leave voluntarily, Arthur said calmly. That's all. Evan, tell your father he's making a mistake. Tell him what this will do to our family. Evan, to his credit, stood his ground. Chloe, what you did is illegal. Dad is being more than fair by giving you a chance to fix this voluntarily. Fix what? I did nothing wrong. You committed identity theft by putting their bills in your name. You committed mail fraud by forwarding their mail. You attempted property fraud by researching ways to transfer their house to your name. Those are crimes, Chloe. I was trying to help this family. By stealing from my parents. By taking responsibility when no one else would. Arthur stepped in. Chloe, you have 7 days to transfer everything back to our names. You have 30 days to find another place to live. Those are your options. And if I refuse, then you will be evicted, and the criminal charges will proceed. She looked at Arthur with barely concealed hatred. You would really do that? You would really destroy your son's marriage and take away your grandson over some paperwork? I would really protect my home and my wife from someone who has been trying to systematically steal from us? Yes. She turned to Evan desperately. You can't let them do this to us. Evan looked at his wife with profound sadness. Chloe, they aren't doing anything to us. You did this to us. I did it for us. No, you did it for you. And now our son is going to grow up with a mother who tried to steal from his grandparents. That seemed to break something in Chloe. She sank onto our sofa, still holding the baby. I just wanted security, she said quietly. I wanted to make sure our family had a stable home. You already had one, Evan said. My parents gave it to us freely. For how long? What happens when they die? What happens when this house gets sold and we have nowhere to go? Then we figure it out like adults, Chloe. We don't steal from the people who have been helping us. She looked between Evan and Arthur said he could see her calculating one last, desperate move. Fine, she said, standing up abruptly. Fine. You want me to leave? I'll leave. But I'm taking my son with me, and you will never see him again. Evan's face went white. Chloe, Don't do that. What? Protect my child from people who would destroy his family over money? This isn't about money. It's all about money, she screamed. It's about a house and bills and property values. You're choosing money over your own grandson. It was then, Arthur told me, that Evan finally found his strength completely. Actually, Chloe, you won't be taking him, Evan said, his voice quiet but firm. Because I'm filing for divorce, and I'm filing for full custody. The silence that followed, according to Arthur, was deafening. Chloe stared at Evan as if he had just spoken in a language she didn't understand. You can't, she whispered. I can, and I will. A mother who commits fraud against her own child's grandparents is not someone who should have unsupervised custody of that child. Evan, you can't do this to me. You can't take my baby away from me. I'm not taking him from you. I'm protecting him from a mother who thinks theft and fraud are acceptable ways to provide for her family. Chloe's face crumbled. Please, she begged, please don't do this. I'll fix everything. I'll transfer the bills back. I'll cancel the mail forwarding. I'll move out. Just don't take my baby from me. You should have thought about that before you decided to commit crimes, Evan said firmly. The following days were a whirlwind of legal activity. True to her word, Chloe transferred all the utilities back to our names. The mail forwarding was canceled. She moved out of our house and into an apartment across town, taking only her personal belongings. But the criminal charges proceeded. Robert had advised us that letting the legal process play out was the only way to ensure Chloe couldn't try this again with us or someone else. The divorce proceedings were swift. When the judge heard about Chloe's attempted property fraud, coupled with her threat to use the child as a weapon against the grandparents, custody was granted to Evan with supervised visits for Chloe. Throughout this tumultuous period, I rediscovered my voice. Years of being diminished in my own home had left me with few words, with little confidence to express my thoughts and feelings. But as the legal proceedings unfolded, I was called to testify, to explain how I had been gradually pushed out of my own space, how my authority had been undermined, how my dignity had been attacked. The first time I walked into the courtroom, I felt my legs tremble. The thought of speaking in public terrified me. But as I began to describe the years of small humiliations, of the gradual loss of autonomy, of being treated like an intruder in my own home, the words began to flow. She rearranged my kitchen without permission, I told the judge. She criticized my cooking, my cleaning, my way of being. She pushed me out of spaces in my own house, one by one, until I was moving like a shadow, trying not to disturb, trying not to be noticed. The judge looked at me with empathy. And when the baby was born, when my grandson was born, I was forbidden to touch him. She called me filthy. She pushed me to the ground when I tried to get close to him. My voice did not waver. My hands did not shake. For the first time in years, I felt strong, secure in my truth, unshakable in my resolve to reclaim not just my house, but my dignity. Chloe was sentenced to 2 years of probation and community service for the fraud charges. She was ordered to pay restitution for all legal fees and costs associated with repairing what she had done. She saw her son every other weekend under court supervision, and she was forbidden from bringing him to our house during those visits. Evan moved back into our house temporarily while he saved money for a place of his own. But this time it was different. He paid rent. He helped with household expenses. And most importantly, he treated us like the homeowners we were, not like elderly relatives who needed to be managed or overcome. 6 months after the initial confrontation, I was in our garden tending to my roses while watching Evan push his son on the swing set Arthur had installed. The sound of the baby's laughter was like music, filling the spaces that had for so long been suffocated by tense silence and fear. The house felt like ours again. I could sing in the kitchen while I made breakfast. I could rearrange the cabinets just how I liked them. I could speak up during dinner without being interrupted or corrected. Small freedoms that should never have been taken from me, but that I now treasured with a renewed appreciation. Arthur joined me in the garden, putting his arm around my shoulders as we watched our son and grandson. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I'm better than okay," I answered. "I'm home." One evening, a few months later, Evan joined Arthur and me on the porch while his son played in the yard. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden light over our small patch of peace. "Mom? Dad?" Evan said, his voice serious. "I owe you an apology." "For what?" I asked. "For letting this go on for so long. For not seeing what she was doing. For not protecting you when I should have." I looked at my son, this man who had found his courage when it mattered most. "Evan, you protected us when it mattered," I said. "When the choice was clear, you chose what was right. It shouldn't have taken so long. Maybe not, but you got where you needed to go." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the little boy run around the yard, his face lit up with carefree joy and curiosity. He saw me watching and came running over, holding a small flower he had found. "Grandma, look," he exclaimed, holding the flower out to me. "For you." I took the flower gratefully, feeling tears well up in my eyes. For so long I had been kept at a distance from this little treasure. Now he came to me freely, offering gifts, seeking my affection. "Thank you, my love," I said, kissing the top of his head. "Did you really think she could take our house?" I asked Arthur later that night, as we lay in our bed. "She really believed she deserved it," he answered. "That was the scariest part. She genuinely believed living here for 8 years gave her more rights than 40 years of ownership." I thought about that. People can convince themselves of anything if it serves their purposes. "The funny thing is," Arthur continued, "if she had just been grateful, if she had just been respectful, we probably would have helped them forever." He was right. If Chloe had treated our home and us with respect and gratitude, if she had contributed to our household instead of trying to control it, if she had asked for help instead of trying to take what she wanted, we would have been happy to support our son's family indefinitely. But she couldn't do that, I said. She needed to be in control. She needed to own things instead of just enjoying them. And now she's lost everything. I looked out the window, where the moon cast a soft glow on our garden, the roses I had planted, the swing set where my grandson played, the house we had almost lost. "Not everything," I said. "She still gets to see her son. She still gets to be his mother, even if it's not in the way she planned." "Do you think she'll ever understand what she did wrong?" Arthur asked. I considered the question. "I think she'll understand that she lost. I don't know if she'll ever understand why. 3 years have passed since those turbulent days. Evan bought a house 4 blocks from ours, close enough for us to walk over for dinner, close enough for our grandson to ride his bike to our house after school, close enough for me to babysit whenever Evan needs me. Chloe remarried last year to a man who owns his own home. She still sees our grandson every other weekend and, according to Evan, seems happier now that she has her own domain to control. Perhaps she learned something from her experience, or perhaps she just found a new target for her ambitions." Arthur and I updated our wills recently, leaving everything to Evan and setting up a trust fund for our grandson's education. The house Chloe tried so hard to take will stay in our family after all, but it will be passed down through love and generosity, not theft and fraud. Sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about what would have happened if Arthur hadn't found those papers, if he hadn't overheard that phone call. If we had just continued to ignore the small signs that something was wrong, Chloe might have succeeded. She could have gradually taken over our home so completely that by the time we realized what was happening, it would have been too late to stop her. We could have been that elderly couple on the news, the ones who lost everything to opportunistic family members, the ones who end their days confused and homeless, stripped not only of their material possessions but of their dignity. But Arthur did find those papers. He did hear that conversation. And when it came time to choose between keeping the peace and protecting our family, he chose protection. This ends now. Those 3 words he said to Evan that day in the kitchen, when he called him in and showed him those papers, were simple but powerful. Sometimes, that's all it takes to change everything. I'm happy again now. I sing while I cook. I tend to my garden with joy. I play with my grandson without fear of being criticized or corrected. Our house feels like our home again. And our grandson is learning something important. That love doesn't come with conditions. That generosity doesn't demand gratitude. But that respect is non-negotiable even within families, especially within families. This morning, as I was making breakfast for Evan and my grandson who had slept over, I felt a deep sense of peace. The toast was golden, the coffee scented the air, and I had arranged fresh little flowers from the garden in a vase in the center of the table. The sun streamed through the kitchen windows, illuminating a space that was once again my own. Evan came in, sleepy-eyed, followed by the little one who ran straight to hug me. "Good morning, Grandma," he exclaimed, his arms tight around my waist. "Good morning, my love," I replied, kissing the top of his head. Arthur joined us, his smile warm as he watched the scene. We sat down to breakfast together, chatting and laughing freely, with no tension, no fear, no constant feeling of walking on eggshells. As Evan and the little one were about to leave, my grandson stopped in the doorway and turned back to me. "Grandma, can I come back after school? I want you to teach me how to make those cookies I like." "Of course you can, my love," I answered. "This is your house too." And it was true. This was his house, too, not because he was entitled to it, not because he had taken it, but because we shared it freely, with love and mutual respect. The difference was everything. After they left, I went back to the kitchen to clean up. As I washed the dishes, I reflected on how life can change in an instant, how one moment of courage, one decision to stand up for yourself, can completely alter the course of a family. For so long, I had felt powerless, unable to defend my own space, my own dignity. I had allowed my voice to be silenced, my territory to be invaded piece by piece, day by day. The fear of creating conflict, of seeming like the villain in the story, had kept me quiet. But I learned something important through this painful journey. Silence is not peace. It is just the absence of resistance. True peace comes from balance, from mutual respect, from clear and healthy boundaries. Arthur came into the kitchen and hugged me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder as I finished drying the last plate. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About everything that happened. About how we almost lost our home. But we didn't," he said softly. "No, we didn't. Thanks to you." "Thanks to us," he corrected. "You were just as brave as I was, Helen. Your testimony in court made all the difference." I smiled, remembering that moment. After years of being diminished, finding my voice had been liberating. Speaking my truth, being heard and validated, had healed something deep inside me. "You know, last month was the first time Chloe looked me in the eye during the handoff with our grandson," I said. "She usually avoids eye contact, but this time she looked at me and nodded. She didn't say anything, but it was something." "Maybe she's starting to understand," Arthur suggested. "Maybe. Or maybe she's just accepted defeat. Either way, our grandson is happy. Evan is doing well, and we have our house." He was right, of course. In the end, that was what mattered. Last week, I received an envelope in the mail. Inside was a card with no signature, just the words "I'm sorry" written in a hand I recognized immediately. Tucked in with the card was a small key, the copy Chloe had made of our house key, without our permission. I didn't show the card to Arthur or to Evan. That small gesture, however insufficient, considering everything that had happened, felt like something private, a quiet acknowledgement, perhaps the beginning of something like remorse. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive Chloe for what she tried to do. I don't know if I'll ever trust her again. But for my grandson's sake, I'm willing to accept that tiny step toward reconciliation. Life is long, and holding on to grudges is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. I learned that lesson the hard way. Now, at 76 years old, I value peace and joy more than revenge or even perfect justice. When my grandson arrived after school that day, eager to learn how to make the cinnamon cookies that were a family tradition, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. As we mixed the ingredients, him chattering away about his day at school, I realized that this was the true inheritance I wanted to leave behind. Not just a house or material possessions, but memories, traditions, unconditional love. "Grandma," he asked as we waited for the cookies to bake, "did you always know how to make these cookies?" "No, my love. My grandmother taught me when I was about your age. And are you going to teach me all her recipes?" "I sure am. And one day, maybe you'll teach your own children." His eyes sparkled at the thought. "And can they come here, too?" "This house will always be open for family who respect and love each other," I replied, kissing his forehead. When Arthur came home that afternoon and found the kitchen smelling of cinnamon and sugar, his face lit up. The three of us sat on the porch, eating still warm cookies and watching the sun begin to set. This, I thought, is what it means to be home. Not just the walls and the roof, not just the deed or the bills in our name, but the feeling of belonging, of safety, of being valued and respected. The ability to move freely, to speak our minds, to be ourselves without fear or hesitation. Those 8 years of the slow erosion of my dignity taught me to never take that freedom for granted again, to defend my space, my voice, my boundaries not with rage, but with clarity and firmness. And the 3 words Arthur said that day, "This ends now," still echo. Sometimes, all we need is someone to stand up for us when we don't have the strength to stand up for ourselves. Someone to see what's happening when we've become blind to our own suffering. Someone to say no more when we've gotten used to saying, "It's okay." Today, when I look at my house, my kitchen organized just the way I like it, my flowers in the vases I chose, my books on the shelves where I place them, I feel a mix of gratitude and resolve. Gratitude for having won back what I nearly lost, and resolve to never again let anyone make me feel small in my own space. My name is Helen. I am 76 years old, and this is my house. My voice matters here. My presence is valued. My dignity is respected, and no one will ever convince me otherwise again. Now, if you like this story, click on this next video that is appearing on the screen, because in it, the story of betrayal and revolt like you have never seen before.